Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. How many people have seen the movie? Most of you. So probably most everyone realizes that they changed things quite a bit. But I'm working on getting a remake of the movie with the hope to, tell it more the way it really happened. So toward that end, anybody that would like to write me a little email at my website, traviswalton.com, and say, in a short statement that they would like to see a remake, I'll put all these comments together with, hundreds that I've already received and bind them up together and take them to a producer and to emphasize the point that we'd like to have a more accurate telling. But there were things that were fictionalized and, condensed and simplified in the movie. And to a certain extent, that's understandable because, it's a very visual medium. And, even though in my book I go into all kinds of detail about exactly what happened, you can't have talking heads and you basically can't tell. You have to show. So they dramatize things that you would have to take a great deal of time to explain verbally, it's just a much better way to do it. For example, in the movie, there's a scene where the actor is held down with this membrane over his face, and he's struggling to breathe through this. And although that didn't happen, it does a much better job of conveying to the audience the reason that I was experiencing so much panic, because nothing will generate more panic in you than not being able to breathe. And so, other simplifications like I had two brothers, Don and Dwayne, that were combined into one character in the movie named Dan. It's not accurate, it's not documentary, and it's not really intended to be. So those kinds of things are, acceptable. And in a future movie, there might be those sorts of things going on. But basically what I'm really pushing for is to kind of pass on to people the kind of evolving awareness that I've had about what it really all meant in my own personal opinion and analysis. Right after it happened, I was so traumatized that, I was, only too willing to accept Hollywood's take on it as being, kind of a horrific, very negative experience, which it was. But in hindsight, perhaps not deliberately on their part. Anyway, it was just an ordinary work day, and I'm advancing this here, and it's not advancing. So anyway, if we could advance the slides, it's not working. I can do without them if it's not going to work. We'd been putting in some long days. We were trying to finish up the contract before the winter weather shut us out, and there we go. And so we worked till almost dark, and a lot of people aren't aware that in Arizona we got quite a bit of forest, the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. And so, we drove, maybe half an hour east or west from Snowflake to Heber, and then up into the mountains near the rim for the job. One of the highest points in Arizona, a lot of forest. You could, see San Francisco peaks, which clear over 100 miles from there. So the crew comprised of Michael Rogers, the crew boss. He was in the upper left there. Ken Peterson with the glasses, and Alan Dallas, the black sheep of the family. Lower left was Dwayne Smith. Couldn't get a hold of him, so he wasn't really included in the cast. As you might have noticed in the movie, there was only 6 in the crew. There was actually 7 of us. John Gillette in the center at the bottom there, and then Steve Pierce, the youngest guy on the crew. He was played by Henry Thomas, the little boy from the wee E.T., grown up, and it's me back then. And we all fit into a crew cab truck, a double cab truck, so 3 in the front, 4 in the back. We finished the day's work. We loaded up our equipment in the back, and we're headed out of there. In the movie, it gives the impression that we'd been driving for some time and we're getting drowsy, like it was a long drive. It was a long drive, but, we hadn't gone very far before we noticed these glimmers of light. So everybody was still in a very alert state from, having been working hard physically just moments before. And we saw this little glimmers of light. And of course, out in the woods, it's a very remote area. That's something out of the ordinary, but not at first real alarming. It was just kind of a curiosity at first. And then, the more it wasn't adding up. We were driving south up towards the rim, which is, the higher point, which is also, the rim road also borders the Apache reservation there. And the road was paralleling the back of this ridge, but it was kind of down off of the left side of the ridge. So the peak of the ridge was to our right. And as we were driving along, these little glimmers of light, I at first thought it was probably deer hunters. But then I realized that the source of the light was coming from higher than where the crest of the ridge would have been, in other words, above ground level. So that didn't add up. And, it wasn't like the whole crew immediately spotted the light. It was just all these little conversations among the groups of people paired off talking, suddenly started, dropping out of sight real quickly. And so everybody was looking in the same direction. At first I was thinking the hunters, and then I thought, well, maybe there's a lightning strike, because the forest in that area has the highest number of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States other than the Everglades. So we have quite a few hits, and we've even encountered that on the way to work before, where the trees sitting there burning because it was recently hit by lightning. But it'd been clear, dry weather. We didn't have any stormy weather that would explain that. So I thought, well, perhaps a plane crashed. And I found out later one of the other crew members was kind of thinking the same thought. But, this little mental inner deliberation didn't go on too long because I could see a break in the trees up ahead where the light was sort of shining across the road. It was pretty thick growth at the time. And I said, Mike, hurry up, get up there where we can see, So we got up there, and as soon as we got into where this light was shining across, we looked to our right, and there it was, hovering in plain sight. No mistaking this for the planet Jupiter, like our debunker there. That was one of his first theories, Unmistakable. Alan yelled out, "It's a flying saucer!" Because it was self-evident. Everybody knew what we were looking at. This was not some ball of light in the distance, and it wasn't so bright that we couldn't see the structure. It was incredible, the sight. John was saying here. He spoke with me recently. He was one of the crew members sitting in the back there. He was saying that to him, it was like some fantastic sports car, it was smooth as glass. It was metallic in parts of it, and parts of it were glowing, but not so brightly you couldn't see the whole thing. And I had the impression that it was just going to be gone real quickly, and that was what I was thinking when I threw open the door and started towards it. Alan Dallas was said in an interview way back that it looked to him like I was being controlled, like I was in some kind of trance. And Steve says the same thing. But, as far as my own perceptions are concerned, to me, I felt like I wasn't completely under my own control. I was just really curious and thinking that, the closer I could get to it before it got away, the more I might learn, just see it up close. It was a little bit of me kind of showing off for the crew, but, mainly I was just awestruck, looking up at this thing. It just had the most awe-inspiring, the power of it, The crew said that they could feel the vibration in the truck, but the closer I got, the more scared I became and the more agitated the crew became, and they started yelling at me to get back in the truck. But I came to a point where there was a pile of logging debris, and I couldn't really get that much closer. So I was looking up at it at about like a 45-degree angle. And I stopped just short of the pile, and they were really screaming and swearing at me to get back in the truck. And so, I turned to look at them, and it suddenly got louder, and it started to move and rise up. And I was startled by that, so I jumped for cover. And the closest thing was this pile of logging debris. I got down behind a log that was sticking out there. I was in a crouch there, and I was thinking, I'm going to jump up and sprint back to the truck. And they were really, getting pretty intense with saying, "Let's go, get out of there." And so I didn't really need to be told. I was thinking right then that I'd got myself in a real fix here, and I was kind of torn between staying hidden behind the log and just getting back in the truck and getting away from there. But I decided to sprint back, and when I raised up, as soon as I stood fully up, I just felt this numbing shock go through me. Dwayne Smith, one of the guys on the crew, he later became an electrician. To him, he said it sounded like electricity. But in the police file, one of the men was quoted in the report as saying that it looked like a long blue flame, and the others described it as looking like a beam. But it was extremely powerful, they said, and they said the most incredibly bright thing they'd seen in their life. It lit up the night brighter than day. And they said it was like I stepped on a landmine. Like it just threw me back through the air. And they were talking amongst themselves, they said, about how, screaming back and forth, it killed him. He's dead, because the way my body went flying through the air, I initially described it as being like 10 feet, but Steve come back around here recently, the youngest guy on the crew, and he's insisting, no, it's more like 20 feet. But however it was, my body flew through the air, and the way I landed limp and wasn't protecting myself from the fall, that they just assumed, they just knew I was dead. He's dead. It killed him, just like they said in the movie. So it's entirely understandable that they would take off like that, Steve, he's always reluctant to admit that he was scared, or, he's trying to say that Mike took off and he wasn't one of the ones yelling, "Get us out of here." But, I'll go with the description of the majority that everybody screamed, "Get us out of here," And of course, Mike was responsible for the safety of the whole crew. They just seen somebody get killed, so I don't find fault with them that they didn't risk their own lives to save a dead body, So they took off, and they nearly wrecked the truck, driving through the woods, just running over trees and whatnot. And they described, being fearful that they were being chased and in a real panic. And they finally, once they couldn't see the craft behind them anymore, and I wasn't following them, they jumped out and were yelling at each other about what to do. And they saw some deer hunters just, they were almost to the rim road, and they saw them passing by, and they had this idea, well, it's not safe to go back, we're unarmed, but, we could get some guns from these hunters. And because they already realized at that point they were going to have to go back. But so they went and tried to catch the deer hunters, and then they couldn't do it. But see, when Mike pulled over and he said, "All right, we got to go back and see if we can rescue him," some of the guys said, "No way, we're not going back there. Let's just go in, get some help," and but